But it does lead me to China and the Russian relationship. I'm very obviously skeptical of just how far this goes. It's more strategic convenience, marriage of convenience. What do you think the Chinese are thinking right now in the context of the war in Ukraine, but also what's happened in Venezuela? Never want to underestimate what the CCP is capable of or thinking, but I'm curious how you see that mentioned.
Well, the Chinese relationship with Russia has always been highly transactional. They don't see the Russian Federation as in the least bit comparable to what they have in China, and I think that's an accurate assessment. That said, they don't want Russia to lose the war. I believe President Xi has said that explicitly publicly, and they are the biggest enabler of the military industrial complex of Russia. They're the ones providing the wherewithal. Remember, in the early days of the war, the full-blown war, Russia was buying huge numbers of refrigerators and then stripping them for their chips and other elements that were useful in the Russian military industrial complex. China is now providing all of that, the magnets that are required, the chips, the all of the components necessary to manufacture hardware and software and so forth, and munitions. But again, that's because it's in their interest to prolong this war now. Remember, they were originally irritated by Russia's action because they were trying to develop a larger economic relationship with Ukraine, which keep in mind was exporting some 20 or 25% of the world's grain exports, not all production, but the exports. So again, it's a complicated relationship. China has learned from the Soviet Union. Their lesson is don't go soft like Gorbachev did. And they're certainly trying to learn from what's going on the battlefield. They may be doing that more assiduously than our NATO countries. I think they have a very wary eye as they see U.S. capabilities demonstrated, for example, in Caracas. No other military in the world could remotely have done that. And by the way, I think it was a much dicier operation than people seem to realize. Look, imagine the gunfights that took place, given that there were over 30 Cuban special operations forces augmenting the secret service of Venezuela, and I don't know how many Venezuelans had to be taken out. But there was some serious military action here, vastly more challenging than the operation to get Osama bin Laden, as important strategically and as challenging in some individual cases, not to mention uh, the hard landing of the first aircraft, which meant that it couldn't be flown out. By the way, the lead helicopter was hit in this case. It's a very large MH-47 Chinook configured for special ops, and lead pilot was hit several times in the leg, and they had to I'm sure there was awareness of this by those monitoring the operation, having monitored a few in my life in Iraq and Afghanistan, Central Command and CIA. Yet he stuck the landing and they managed to fly that aircraft out back to the appropriate location. Look, China looks at that and it realizes what we have, notwithstanding their enormous increase in shipbuilding, autonomous system development, a host of other capabilities. But also, let's recognize they keep firing all their senior military. How do you have the confidence in your senior leaders if you have to fire them as regularly as President Xi has been doing? In any event, this stuff is complex. I don't buy the spheres of responsibility or what have you at all. I think the U.S. is active around the world. I think it actually is not a surprise that President Trump has not proved to be the isolationist that some of the campaign supporters and even perhaps campaign remarks might have indicated.
No, certainly not. I think anyone who thought he was an isolationist didn't understand what Trump really represents.